Do you know what, James? Artificial neural networks in 1994 was considered mind-blowing, right? People were asking, why on earth are you trying to mimic the behaviors and skills of a lawyer and a QS? Grenfell Tower happened, and I thought, that's it. This industry is so broken. What can I do to fix it?
In the future, is there a role for a standalone QS?
It can be.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Project Flux podcast. And we have not one, but we've got two guests today, which we're very, very fortunate to have. We have Dr. Bola, Abisogun, and we have Patrick King. We're going to get onto their introductions in a minute, but before that, just wanted to give a big shout out to our sponsors as ever, Construct AI. Do check out their fantastic fine-tuned large language model specifically for the construction industry. It's a real game changer in terms of what you can do and the information that it's trained on. So do try that out. So without further ado, we'll go straight into the interview. And we've got two people to say hello to today. So we'll start off with Bola. Bola, thank you so much for coming on. It's a real pleasure. I've been following you for many years now, and you're such a character and somebody who really brings a smile to everyone's face. You know, one thing I always think of you, whenever I finish a conversation with you, I always have a smile on my face because you bring a lot of joy to people. So thank you for sort of spreading that joy, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, James. Thank you, James. And in my capacity as Chief Excitement Officer, I like to think I'm doing my job
love
right.
it.
Yeah.
Well, you know, first of all, the fact that your title is Chief Excitement Officer is amazing, but it does really match your whole persona as well.
Thank you,
and
buddy.
We were trying to work out, you know, you've got so many companies and roles that you're working on. What did we actually want to introduce you as? And we are going to talk about AIQS a bit later. But one of the big things that you're, as you said, Chief Excitement Officer of is the Digital Twin Skill Academy. That's one of your main roles. But we'll come on to that later. We'll talk a lot about what got you to where you are now and then what the future looks like. But before that, also want to say hello to our second guest, Patrick King, the Director of Operations at AIQS. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm less of an excitement officer than Bola, but he makes the days full of joy.
Well, you know, there's only room for one excitement officer, I guess. But I need to question my own.
Someone's got to be serious.
Excellent. Well, look, before we get into some of the technical stuff and we start moving on to AIQS, can you just sort of describe, I mean, I guess you describe yourself actually as an industry disruptor, an unapologetic industry disruptor, and it's important. So, but what's the biggest system or mindset that you've had to challenge?
Wow, great question. You know, I didn't willingly become a disruptor, if I'm honest. I just figured out about 20 years ago when I set up diversity surveyors, actually, to challenge the profession around diversity, right? I didn't see people like me in leadership, James, you know, and that's
how long ago was this?
This is 99, 2000, right?
Wow. Okay.
Literally took the conversation to RICS and said, guys, I graduated 94, qualified 99. Haven't seen anyone like me at senior leadership. What are you doing about it? And that was to RICS. And their challenge was, we're here to support you. And that was great. So I set up diversity surveyors to corral a network and community of like-minded Black and brown surveyors who were aspiring to get into those leadership positions but just weren't getting the access. That was 25 years ago. And of course, I graduated in 94 with my thesis in artificial neural networks and hypertext expert systems in 94, thinking the industry was ready, right? James, I thought the industry was ready, buddy. They gave me a first class honors. Franklin and Andrews took me on, graduate QS. I landed 1st of November 1994 in their office and thought, this cannot be it.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I was slightly later than you, 99, but I did my dissertation also on sort of construction and technology, and just shocked about how backwards it was.
And being backward was one thing, but being intentionally obstructive towards innovation was my real pain point. Right? I thought, well, do you know what? Where do I need to go? I ended up in North America, Atlanta, Georgia, August 2000. That was the beginning of my journey regarding to Contech. And then 3 years later, I set up AIQS. 22 years later, on the back of ChatGPT, we're here. But for me, the real opportunity came about in 2017 when Grenfell Tower happened. And I thought, that's it. This industry is so broken. What can I do to fix it? Right? This was my whole disruptive elephant coming out. And the first thing I challenged myself with was, we need next generation to come in with digital and just disrupt the whole thing, right? They play Minecraft. They love gaming. If we can commercialize that, bring it into professional services using digital twins, great. And that 2017 to 2019 was a bit sticky. A lot of disruptive conversations, a lot of pushback, denial. I got spat at sometimes, like, who is this guy? Who does he think he is? Blah, blah, blah. But
So
anyway,
what kind of pushback and denial did you get? I'm just interested in that point.
well, I was challenging the pre-construction process and saying, look, if the client at Grenfell, i.e. RBKC, had commissioned a pre-construction twin, it's unlikely that cladding would have ended up on the building, right? And I ended up going to Cambridge CDBB with all those great guys and girls to prove the use case, digital twins in social housing. Great. Landed 2021. Building safety was going through the law. Received royal assent April 22. Great. I leave Cambridge. Next steps. What are we going to do about it? What are you going to do about it, Bola? I said, I'm going to set up an academy. And they went, what? And I said, yeah, we need young people to come in and we need to skill them up in digital twin skills.
Why is that such a crazy concept? That they
Because
would
in the
have.
context of what we were doing, it was all the big shiny stuff, the aviation
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
manufacturing and all of those big iconic projects. But where on earth did social housing sit in that context, right? And why would you even think about upskilling us on digital twin skills in the context of building safety? Like, it just didn't land in 2022, right? So I went ahead and set up the academy with a core focus on skilling up local urban inner city youth 16 to 25 who wanted to get into construction, digital construction, who didn't have the access, the networks, the connects, the contacts, just had a passion to get into construction and wanted to do it in a gaming type environment. So that was the whole edtech piece. And the academy was formed in April 23. And the first invitation I got, James, and for you, Yoshi, just so you're aware, we got asked to come and present our use case to the British Embassy, Washington, DC.
Wow,
Like
fantastic.
May 23. They said, come and tell us what you're doing. Right, come and show us.
So what do
And
you
our
think?
link,
What do you think caught on? What do you think was it that made them catch on to think there's something here then?
they in DC at the moment, and Patrick and I are working on this right now. In DC at the moment, they have what they call BEPS, which is Building Energy Performance Standard. And that is the downtown DC mayor's opportunity to decarbonize existing legacy assets, right? So where here we have building safety legacy assets, they have decarbonization legacy assets, common denominator, digital twin. That's how I link the two. And the whole social value piece, getting young people, what they call young Washingtonians, equipped to do that, mind blowing. So that's the common denominator for us, using the twin to create opportunity, employment, big creation for asset owners. And on the one hand, building safety, on the other hand, net zero. That was it. That's what the Academy is trying to do. And Patrick and I are coming on board with the AIQS pieces to focus specifically on construction cost management in that space.
Yeah.
Right? And that ties it back to QSing. So that's kind of the why.
You said something
Does
before.
that make
You
sense?
said it does absolutely, but there's something you said that I just want to pick up on in that you set up AIQS how many years ago?
God
Did you
willing,
say
22 years ago. Out of
so?
frustration, right? It's,
AI is the buzzword now, and
I know.
everyone will think, "Oh, there's all these new startups, AI, everywhere you go." But
Yeah,
actually, you started one 22 years ago. I mean, talk about a
yeah.
slow burn, and now you finally launched it.
Slow
Man,
burn,
you've
yeah.
got some patience, but I'll tell you that.
Do you know what, James? Do you know what it was, buddy? If I'm honest, artificial neural networks in 1994 was considered mind blowing, right? Like, people were asking, why on earth are you trying to mimic the behaviors and skills of a lawyer and a QS to dispute construction claims? I thought, well, the small builder can't afford to pay for that service. So if I can come up with a service where it's free, at least to the point of go to court, don't go to court, then it's going to work, right? That was 94. But even then, 10 years later, AI was just coming out of the ground. And I thought, yeah, I'll reframe artificial neural network, because it's a bit of a mouthful, as AI. And when I registered the business, it was just supposed to be a co-pilot for the QS, just to do all the donkey work, all the mundane stuff that we didn't want to do. Let's just automate it. right? That was
You
the
are
idea.
you are miles ahead of what people were thinking. This is all becoming reality now. I mean, it must be incredible for you to see the technology catch up and enable you to do all the things that you dreamt of 20
It's
years ago.
humbling. It's humbling,
Both
James. I
things.
think I say it to Patrick and my mother all the time. I am humbled just to manifest the vision that people called me the mad scientist. They called me the mad scientist. That's my nickname, right? Mad scientist. And to be honest with you, just the manifestation of it now and the fact that all my guys and girls in the US are saying, how on earth did you come up with the idea? I'm like, forget that for a minute. Let's just focus on the business opportunity right now. And so while everyone's getting hung up on the name and the how, did you register, whatever, I'm like, what do we actually need to do today
Yeah.
to
Well,
remain relevant around the table, right?
tell us a bit about AIQS. I mean, just going forward a bit. So, what is AIQS? And I don't know if you want to come in here, Patrick, and sort of explain to the listeners what it does.
I'm not gonna steal Patrick's thunder because he's spent a long enough time with me. Go ahead, Patrick. Just shoot, buddy. Have a go.
Yeah, so
It's a work
AIQS,
in progress, by the way, guys.
it's it's a platform that centralizes all the different silo data on a given
Yeah.
project. So when we think about data, a lot of people get bogged down and say the maintainable asset data. But when we start to think of like from a pre-construction construction phase, we were thinking about say cost plans, cost reporting, risk registers, programs, delivery plans, social value outputs, sustainability reports, all those different isolated and siloed pieces of information. So when you think of a QS fulfilling a role and a client fulfilling a role, to try and consume all of those, I suppose, PDF data that they normally get in a monthly email across a wide range of projects, it's a lot of information to try and get your head around, to
Absolutely.
digest, to then go and produce your own internal reports for your own governance. So what AIQS does is consumes all of those reports and all of that information, and then it starts to build out dashboards that captures all the information inside of each of those reports. And then the AI agent that works inside of the database then starts to generate monthly reports on behalf of the client and works as a QS assistant and being able to analyze the information. So when we start to think of, say, project risks from a client perspective, they want to be able to understand progress against contract sums. They want to be able to understand the different variations that they're experiencing in the project, or the top 5 business risks that they have across their portfolio. What are the major risks on their projects? What's mitigated, unmitigated? So when you have to start to centralize all that information instead of it just being on a SharePoint site or in a suite of emails, it becomes a lot easier to model the risk to your business, and it actually gives them real-time benchmarking, which they currently don't have in the industry, which they're really struggling to understand. If I have another project 100 meters up the road, similar specification, how much should we spend on that? Where were the big risks on that project? What was the variations that we experienced, and how can we take those lessons learned onto the current projects and the next wave of projects coming through to try and remove waste? So that's kind of what AIQS is, the questions it's trying to answer at the moment.
Yeah. Well, it's such an important point because so often we use out-of-date information to look at what happened maybe, a month ago. How many times do we sit in a board meeting and you look at reports that were produced 2 weeks ago that reported what happened 2 weeks before that, and the only point of that whole conversation is who's to blame for it being late or it being. So I guess one question I've got, and I know Yoshi's got a question too, is who is AIQS aimed at? Is it for the QS or is it for the client? Does it replace the QS or does it augment the QS?
What a great question. So first of all, and I'm going to have to steal your thunder now, Patrick.
Go for it.
Do you know we had this conversation with RICS, and Andrew Knight, bless him, alongside
He's
our
been on the
mutual.
show. Andrew's
Of course he has.
yeah, of
Andrew
course.
has Alan Muse. You had Alan Muse yet?
Not yet, but he's on the
Alan
list.
Muse, go for Alan Muse. That guy, my wingman. Now,
Yeah, love Alan.
conversations with those guys, right? It was designed originally to be a co-pilot for the PQS, but we're nowhere near ready, in all honesty, right? Now, our actual target market is the North American client.
Okay.
Do you know why? Because they have no baggage. They have no historic cost management function like we do in the Western Europe.
Do you see that as a positive?
I see it as a huge value driver. Do you know why? Because in 2000, when I started this conversation about me being an estimator, They were saying then, this is architects in the US were saying, if you could bring your value over to America and take away our pain of having to manage change as an architect and an engineer, we would put you in front of our clients, right? And then I realized that the process that they use at the moment for years has been an architect and engineer finessing project challenge, and then the owner's rep putting it forward for the client to pay. No impartiality at all.
Yeah, it's
So
crazy, isn't it?
my view was, if we make the client more intelligent by providing them with a digital solution that can sense check everything they get in terms of what they receive from their design teams, that's the value proposition we really want to deal with. Now, to do that through the lens of a QS, as was in a market where the QS doesn't exist, was like, wow. And it was a wow factor for them. Forget me or you. It was a wow factor for them. So we're just following, over 24 years, that is, following the narrative that says we would really like to know what you guys do in the UK, but we just don't get the scale rule. They just didn't understand
Yeah,
why we
yeah,
scale.
yeah. It's crazy.
They're going to
The
leave.
word you
They're going to
use
leave.
there, the baggage word, I think is so important, because we've got the history, we've got a lot of things that are positive that come with that, but also it can really, really slow adoption, and it can
Oh,
slow
God.
innovation, that baggage.
Well,
Which
just
is
on that,
what we're going through in the UK. Go ahead, Patrick.
yeah,
That's
just
our
on that,
challenge
like
in the UK.
if we think about it, I suppose the large portion of public sector bodies, i.e., councils and housing associations, they've gone through a digital transformation over the last 15 years, and their digital transformation was Office 365. And over the last 5 or 6 years, the majority of PMO teams within local sector bodies have started to bring in Power BI as their internal reporting mechanisms. So when we start to talk about digital twins and we start to talk about data modeling, their brains are automatically taken back, oh, it's just a Power BI report or a Power BI dashboard, which is completely worlds apart, because
Exactly.
they don't understand the limitations and the restrictions that comes with that digital transformation that they're going through, versus being able to build out a digital twin of data during design and delivery, and then being able to harness that information for when you go into the in-use phase and the lifecycle management of a project, where
Did you
their reporting mechanisms is very much front end of the project, design delivery, what stage are we at, how much have we spent, what's the program, and that's it. And kind of that's on the back of what Bola is saying, is that by going to North America, that's not even part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the shift that clients are having to go through right now, is the shift away from the Power BI dashboard that they see at the monthly catch-up meetings to a digital twin dashboard function that's completely different in its mechanisms and the way it's capturing data, but somewhat similar in essence.
Yeah.
Did you pick up on that, James? I mean, the one thing that Patrick said there, he said a digital twin of the data, right? This is
Yeah.
the key, right? And
Yeah.
for
Can you
us,
explain that? Why is that different to a Power BI? How's that different to a Power BI dashboard?
because we talk about 5D twins. Think about our monthly cost report as a QS is a 5-dimensional perspective to a client, right? It
Yeah.
always has been. For those
Yeah.
that don't know 5D, you've got the 3D height, width, and depth. You add time, you get 4D. You add cost to get 5D, right? Our cost reports have always been 5 dimensions, but they are 2-dimensional because they're on a PDF, right? What we're saying is if you bring the graphical data and you get the visualization as well as the twin, right? But what we are doing in real time, largely through an API architecture, is pushing and pulling live data with latency as appropriate, right? But it's a 5-dimensional view on the project. Now, if you and I, as I keep saying this, we send a cost report day 2 of a month, we press send, and everything in that report within 60 seconds is redundant.
Yes, exactly.
And then the client gets nothing for 30 days, right? But in our world, AIQS world, you can interrogate that data to the nth degree 24/7, 365. And every time you jump into that ecosystem of data, you'll get a different output.
Yeah,
And
and
in
does
terms
it
of risk
use
management,
the large language model kind of agents and stuff to be able to converse with it, or is it very much based on sort of quantitative data?
well, it's a combination, but we're moving towards LLM. I mean, I'm not going to steal Patrick's thunder, but agentic AI basically is our foundation pillar, right? It's going to act and think like a QS. What would we do in a normal givens valuation scenario? We're going to ask for all this data, look at it, check it, Is it right? Is that a version of a version of a version? Is that the right version? All the nonsense we go through and have done for years, James, we would have removed that ambiguity by pushing and pulling the right data at the right time to consolidate our perspective. And our platform isn't just crunching numbers and producing perspective. I'm standing up and saying, I'm owning that data as a chartered QS. I'm standing behind it. That's the value we're bringing. We're bringing that real person in the loop piece as well as the report. So clients aren't just getting data and information conveyed in a meaningful visual way. They're getting, well, let me talk to Bola about this. Is there something we should be aware of here? Is there something that, all of that?
It's huge value to a client. It's
I think
bringing
so.
it to what it should be, getting rid of that lag and being able to make what we always say data-driven decisions straight away.
Correct.
So, Yoshi, I know you had a question.
Yeah, no. I mean, there's a few things that I wanted to touch on actually because
he's got a long list. Go ahead.
He's been writing. I've seen him scribbling down.
No, because it got me thinking. Because Bola, you mentioned, it was easier to implement these new technologies, AI, digital twins within America because you didn't have that baggage, right? And there was the baggage within the UK because we have an existing cost management function that we already have here. Now, when you're then saying you're going to implement agentic behavior, so you're going to emulate a QS, are you reimagining the QS's role within that emulation? Because you can do it in two ways, right? You can emulate it within the way that we have it here in the UK, or you can emulate it in the way you've had it in the US. So which path are you focusing on, or is there a hybrid?
I would say it's a hybrid ultimately, because the baseline is the current model of delivery. You see how I deliver stuff today, right? But I know that model is broken. It's flawed. And the evolution is to now embrace as much agility into the role of the QS to make the QS a cost manager. So yes, we are redefining the business model and the workflow and the pattern of the workflow and the engagement with our stakeholders, i.e. design teams. So the API for us is a godsend, finally, right? But getting people to understand, I'm not interested in your Word file, not interested in your Excel spreadsheet, not interested in your PDF. I want the API link. The world isn't ready for it, right? So what do we do?
Not in this industry, no.
Do you know what I mean? So that's what we're doing.
In banking, they've been doing it for years. Open banking.
I know.
So it's all possible.
But does that answer your question, Yoshi? Because we're evolving into the new business model, an API-driven business model. It's in the cost prediction professional standard, right? This is what most people don't know. James, it will blow your mind, buddy. All of this stuff that we're trying to do has been mandated in many ways, right? But I go up time and time again and I ask practicing professionals, are you abiding by this standard? Never seen it before.
The weird thing is like you say you started AIQS 20 years ago. I was at an event last night, which was an AI event at EY's offices. And someone asked the question, the Egan report came out 1998. And if you look at the recommendations, obviously it couldn't foresee where we were going with AI, but the recommendations, they can easily be applied to what we're doing now. And you actually think, wow, it's taken 20 years to be in a position where we can actually start implementing some of those changes. So it's pretty exciting, but it's also quite alarming that the rate of progress sometimes is 20 years from inception to being able to implement.
100%.
But one thing I also really like was what Patrick mentioned, and this kind of got me thinking, because Patrick, you said about 15, 20 years ago, companies were going through digital transformation, and what they saw that to be was Microsoft Office. And that for me is kind of a second order consequence, because they didn't listen to things that Bola, you were pushing in the 90s. Right, which so they pushed that to one side, went with Microsoft 365, Microsoft Office, and now when they've done this digital transformation piece, they've overlooked all of that. So my thinking and my question now is what are we ignoring now? Which in the next 15 years' time, we're going to say, oh, they did this, but they did it wrong because they overlooked this component.
We don't build out databases. As an industry, we don't use databases. We're still very much pen and paper driven, and our outputs are always in a PDF that gets uploaded onto a CD. Or sent by an email to a client, and we don't have live data that we can actually use. We're not building out our own databases. So what means is that we have no legacy data without having to go and open up a PDF and read it. We can't model our own data because we don't have it structured. Even though we have all of the capabilities and the tools and the equipment to do it, we don't do it as businesses.
And that's because it's so fragmented, right? You've got so many parties in a construction project, and then they all use different tools. They all use different formats. It's almost impossible to bring that all together. So
Well,
whose role is it? Who should be defining what we should be using? Is it the institutions? Is it the government? Or is it someone like you, AIQS, coming in and
well, I
saying
think
this?
it's a good question. I think really a lot of it should be driven by the business owners, because it's if you own a QS business, right? Is it more valuable to you to have your own database in terms of understanding your own cost matrices versus having to go back through your Excel templates and open them up and copy and paste across? Which one allows you to get more cost certainty in your projects that will allow you to win more projects? How much are you paying to the BSI to get access to industry-wide data at a premium rate that could be up to date or maybe a couple of months out of date? Who knows what that time frame is? To a client, at the end of the day, what is the value for them having all this data in a database structure? If you own 40,000, 50,000 properties and you need to have all of that data to be able to carry out sustainability evaluation, fire risk assessments, life cycle costing, that's a lot of PDF reports and Excel
Yes.
trackers to try and digest. But how many people in the industry is doing it right now?
Just to add to that, James, and really just picking up on your question, Yoshi, what are we not doing now that we might regret in 20 years' time? It's the third word in the title of the academy: skills.
Mm.
If I really look back, just going back a step on what Patrick just said, right? I asked the question unapologetically normally when I present, and I ask the audience, who is ready to coexist in an API-driven ecosystem of data, right? I ask the question. No hands go up.
Half the people won't even know what that means.
This is my point, James. This is my point, buddy. Like, we're just not on the skills alone. We're nowhere near. And until we get there,
And that skills gap is getting bigger. I mean,
it is.
with the advent of all these kind of new models that are coming out almost daily now,
Absolutely.
I keep saying to people, you've got to jump on this train now, because every day that you leave it, the skills gap is getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Correct.
But
Exponential.
on that then, Bola, you mentioned a good point at the start of this podcast, and you said we have to train the next generation to bring in that adoption of digital and data. Quite controversial, but do you believe that people within these fees can retrain and drive this change now, or do you think we have to push that to the younger generations?
No, that's another great question. So that for me does two things. Number one, it brings out the equality, diversity, and inclusion piece. You get that intergenerational value piece kicking off straight away. You put a group of 16, 25-year-olds in a group with 40, 50 somethings, and as long as they don't swear at each other, you get amazing fireworks, because you get experience talking to agility and youth and innocence. But when you combine that skill set around a common core which says, right, we need to figure out this challenge. We've got the experience, we don't have the how. You have the how, you don't have the experience. Let's come together, right? You get amazing things kicking off. That's what we're doing on the DTSA program. We're bringing that diversity of thought together, and it works. Not all the time. It can get quite emotive and in many ways a bit personal. But the point is, when you get the right people in the room, leave their ego at the front door, amazing things happen.
Because you focus it on courage, don't you? I think you use the words courage. That leaders
100%.
need to have the courage to be able to drive this change and not be fearful in adopting these technologies, because it can be overwhelming. But one thing I like, which is the ethos that you've had, and I see a synergy with AI, is that you're both driving up the floor. So basically, you're raising the floor, and I think that's what AI does. It makes it accessible to everyone. What you're
Absolutely.
also saying is, hey, anyone can jump into this, and here's how you can use it. And I think that synergy is what's driving everything you've done, which has been awesome.
But it's humbling. But yeah, I mean, it's funny you use that expression, but I call it the upside down model, because I've, like you, James, we've evangelized and advocated to leaders for years, and either they don't get it or they don't want to get it, which is fine. But in a world of competitive advantage, I'm about how does the QS as was become the relevant cost manager moving forward. This is about staying in the game. If you don't embrace this, it will displace you at some point. It's a fact, right? I'm trying to avoid that. I'm trying to say, look, QS, learn to love AI. Just learn to love it, because
Love it.
it's not going to go away. right?
Exactly. And this is what I've been saying for so long, is that, this is coming, that you can't put your head in the sand and pretend it's not going to come. And it's irrelevant really whether it's 1 year or whether it's 5 years. It's on its way. So it brings us on really nicely to my next question I wanted to talk about, which is, so what is the future of the QS? And I suppose a follow-up question to that is, does it pose a threat to jobs in construction?
Well, look, it poses a threat to the unproductive swathe of any part of this environment. And I'll bring it back to one thing. The Building Safety Act for me is the Trojan horse, right? The golden thread legal requirement in the UK, at least, is the Trojan horse. The fact that 72 people died and a piece of legislation has come about, it's been effective 6th of April last year. We're approaching the first year anniversary. The fact that 90% of the industry have no idea what the golden thread really means on site at Gateway 3, right, is a concern for me. But the golden
Massive.
thread, as you know, is a chronological evidence-based representation of what you did, what you designed, what you got permission to build, and what you actually built. Now, the QS in that role is the custodian of cost, time, and quality. Now, whether you like it or not, the QS has to step up. But the QS business model is too fragmented. Like you said, James, we can't pull in the data quickly enough, go through it sensibly enough, and generate the right outcomes in a consistent manner. We've got to use the tools around us, right? So for us, that means leaning on the next gen to help that become less of a heavy lift, but doing it now because the rate of change, what I have to consume in what Patrick and I go through on a daily basis just to stand still in our knowledge is insane. We consume so much, just like you guys, to stand still, right? Yet there's a whole industry that thinks they don't need to know about it. You do.
Yeah. Well, that's why
You
we do
do.
that. I mean, we say every week, that's why we do Project Flux, because it is overwhelming. So we try and sort
It
of
is.
bring that down to something which is digestible. But I have to say, over the last few weeks, Yoshi, it's been almost impossible, hasn't it, to really digest it, because there's just been so much happening.
Well, the other
I
day,
don't
this
know
is
how
quite
you
a
guys do it.
philosophical thing that I saw, but
We don't know.
I don't know how you do it.
the other day I saw a thing on the news. I think it was a Reddit story, and it said, of all of our ancestors, we have consumed the most information. And that for me is crazy, because you think how much more have we consumed, and we've now got to distill that into something actionable so we can drive change. The problem is, you take too much information, you get into that stagnant thing because you get analysis
Yeah.
paralysis. But you just have to start, and once you start, you then get into that what people call the runner's high, right? I don't get that personally, but in this context, you get that, and just trying to find that sweet placement is where we need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
I agree. I
I
agree.
think
Go ahead, Pat.
Just on Bola's earlier point about the transformation within the QS environment. I think if we go back say 15, 16 years ago, when the architects and the structural engineers, they all went through that big transition from a 2D environment into a 3D environment. You had the old guard architects there. They're in their maybe 10, 15 years from buying the boat and sailing to the south of France, and
Oh,
they
we
had to
remember those guys.
completely, yeah, they had to completely upscale in terms of using this 3D modeling software, and leaning on the younger generation to try and get them upskill, and then the old guards passing that knowledge back down to the young people. And there was always going to be friction between some of the old guards wanted to upskill, wanted to change, others just wanted to keep doing it the way they were doing it for the last 20 years. And those type of individuals will find themselves being completely phased out of a business, because those architectural companies, their whole business model had to change.
That's
And
right.
it comes down to commercial value. You can only have someone looking over a young person's shoulder for so long, telling them to draw a line there and put a door in there and a window over there, before he has to start doing it himself to be
Yeah,
a
but
commercially viable business.
Patrick, even then though, buddy, it was optional. Even then it was optional, right?
To a
Today,
certain extent. But the QSs have never gone through a digital transformation. It's just now it's starting to happen to a certain extent.
Can I ask a
I would
question?
agree, although I think I've started to work.
In the future, and I don't, so let's say 5-10 years in the future, is there a role for a standalone QS, or does the QS function get rolled into a wider kind of agentic thing that someone takes care of, like it becomes part of the project management duty? Something I've been thinking and wrestling with for quite some time. is it still a separate discipline?
It can be, no doubt it can be. And there are still clients that will want to pay for it. I just don't see the value, personally.
So what
You
does
can
that
buy
future look
two
like then?
types of car. You can buy two types of car, James, a manual and an automatic. They still get you from A to B, hopefully. They don't break down, right? But that traditional piece, that role, there is a role. One guy said to me, well, if we just switch off all of the electricity and pull out all the plugs, you'll have to do it by hand. I'm like, yeah, okay. You're not going to pull out the plug of every data center, but I get your point. But I just don't see the value in that piece anymore because A, you get someone to measure and quantify a set of drawings and come up with a number, and that design is changed twice within 12 hours. What is the rate? What is the cost of the client to get the new number in the quickest possible time? And how accurate will it be? Now, that's the metric we're fighting against. You can fight that fight all day long if you want. I don't want to fight that fight. I'll accept what the machine tells me and I'll sense check it in my professional capacity. So I don't know why clients still think there's a value in paying the human to measure and quantify assets. I understand the logic behind it, but I know there's a better way, right? And I do not want to be in that measurement space. People love it. People want to do it. Great. But the value proposition is diminishing over time.
But it
We
might
need
become
to become a
more
new
like an
type of cost
art.
manager.
There's certain things that we
It's a
do.
dark art, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's certain things that we don't need to
It's
do
a
now,
dark
like
art now.
carpentry or even running. We run for fun rather than because we have to. So we just evolve, but it doesn't mean that you can't still use that skill in a more artistic manner. So a few people on the podcast have said maybe there'll be a reaction against AI in that there'll be some organizations that say, actually, we don't use AI. We do things manually, the old fashioned way, and use that as a selling point. Is that something you think could be possible?
I see, but I don't know what client group you're going to be entertaining with that. I mean, unless they actually want to buy that service, and I know some will always want to, but I'm a big blue sky thinker. So I'm like, in the global context of a 12.4 trillion industry, how much of it will be served by QSs physically quantifying and measuring built assets? I'm not sure. But what I do know is that the speed upon which that output is generated cannot compete with the machine. So I'm happy to sit with the machine and sense check what the machine is doing in my professional capacity. I think there's more value for a client in doing that.
Because I think one thing that I looked at when I was kind of comparing, machine cognition with humans, was that humans were incredibly adaptable and they would reflect extensively. But the one thing they couldn't compete on was being optimized. And Bola, you've touched on latency quite a bit. You've touched on time and you've touched on speed. So I can see that's an emphasis for you. But the thing that the AI also does is the accuracy point. So it scales
100%.
up in both accuracy and speed. So the bottom line is, why would you not do this if it gives you those two things?
It's your business model, Yoshi. If your business model is, this is why I talk about at the core of everything, it's the business model. Now, I've asked QS practices, would you be prepared to blow yourself up? I've had a beautiful conversation with my mate, Mark Farmer. I said, Mark, would you blow up cost to become more agile, resilient, etc.?
That's a
He
really
laughed.
good question.
Right? Would you blow yourself up to become more competitive? Not many would. The good thing is, in 2003, that was the business model I was talking about, right?
Yeah.
Agile, API, data-driven.
The thing is,
it took 20 years.
If we don't do it, then other people will do it to us. That's the issue.
Exactly.
Software companies.
That's the baggage piece you were saying.
They're doing
right?
it. That's the baggage piece, Yoshi. And this is why culturally, this is why we have researched the business case to death in this country about what our options are. And we, to your point, both James and Yoshi, we're stuck in paralysis around what to do next, right? We don't like what the truth is telling us. So let's just talk about it. Let's have another cup of coffee, a few more biscuits. Let's just talk about it. Right. Over there, they've moved into implementation.
Yeah.
They're like, let's do it. Let's have a go.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's just have a go.
Time is of the essence,
learn
right?
quickly. Let's have a go.
Yeah, exactly. We're just coming towards the end. A couple more quick questions for you. If you could change, like, looking at the construction industry as a whole, not just QS, if there's one thing that you could change overnight, what would it be?
If I could change one thing about my profession, the average QS, it would be their attitude towards innovation.
Is it changing?
And I mean,
Has it got better, or are we still stuck where it was in 1994?
because I think QSs are quite arrogant generally. I think the relationship with the QS and innovation has to change, and they have to link innovation with productivity. To your point, Yoshi, maybe even accuracy. But apparently, the QS is so accurate, no one checks the QS's outputs, right? Which is technically what AIQS is going to start doing. We're not interested in producing cost reports and cost plans, as Patrick would tell you. We want to optimize the decision-making capacity based on the information and data that comes into the client organization. Right? Now, no one's ever done that before. The client should be able to do it, but if they're not a QS, what they're looking for, we're trying to emulate the QS thought process inside the client body itself to make the client more intelligent. That's reverse engineering what we do as QSs. So we're now auditing and checking the outputs of the QS with risk, likely to get shut down, but we're doing it in the client's best interest. Yeah. And then when you link insurance, it's upside down model, right? Upside down model. And when you link that to the fact that digital twins are coming into the insurance space, and then you look at the construction phase insurance cover, can you imagine a world where you're linking agile insurance through APIs and linking that to person-centric, consultant-centric type outputs in real time? Agile premiums, this is a world of utopia. But
yeah. And there's no reason why we can't get there. But that has got to be the North Star.
100%.
That's got to be what we aim for. So on that very optimistic note, we've come to the end. It's been an incredible conversation. But Bola, Patrick, where can people find out more about what you do in AIQS? Do you want to give them we'll put it in the show notes, but if you just want to let people know, that'd be great.
Yeah, you can find us on AIQS website. We have the book a demo button there, so we can send you out links to find more about the platform. The Chief Excitement Officer is happy to meet and greet, take you through the fun mechanisms of the platform, how it all works. So yeah, we're always happy to share our knowledge and show examples of what we're doing, trying to get to that North Star.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time. It's been fantastic, really fascinating. And I'm so excited to see what you're going to do with AIQS. 22 years in the making, and now it's finally being unleashed into the world. So I do hope you'll come back again, both of you, to show us some progress and where AIQS is going to go. But for now, thank you both so much for your time, and we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you so much.
Project Flux is here.
Just want to give a big shout out to our sponsors, Construct AI. For anyone interested in looking at Construct AI, the link's in our show notes. There's a free tier that you can play around with. Yoshi and I have been using it for a good year since it was originally launched, and we get a huge amount of value out of it. So I thoroughly encourage everyone to go onto the Construct AI site and have a play around.
Cool. And guys, before we sign off, please don't forget to share, follow, and like all of our stuff. So that helps us to engage with you and understand a bit more about what you want, so we can bring it to your doorstep as early as possible.
Project Flux is here.
That's a wrap for today's episode. But before you go, exciting news. Project Flux is teaming up with Project Management Global to bring you the latest in AI-driven project delivery and essential management insights. Through this partnership, expect weekly AI insights, practical tools, and expert thought leadership, ensuring you stay ahead in the evolving project landscape. Stay tuned for exclusive content, joint research, and strategies to supercharge your project outcomes. You can learn more at www.pm-global.co.uk and be part of the future of project management.